Hey there, athletes. Coach John Ferry here from Team Wilpers. Excited as always to welcome you to our athlete briefing. It's athlete briefing number 2 for our 2023 Holiday Run Challenge. Congratulations to everyone who completed that 20-minute distance test this week and set a new baseline for the 6 weeks to follow. Already a huge achievement right off the bat. And if you didn't do that, obviously you did our progression run. So before we go any further, let's just start with our week 1 review here. So if you didn't do the distance test, you did that progression run. So we touched on a lot of ranges here, both the high end and the low end of easy pace. I really wanted to kind of illustrate those early, to kind of feel what both the easy end of it and the harder end of easy pace is. Got up over the course of the workout, slowly progressed all the way to a little bit faster than half marathon pace, almost getting up to that threshold pace. Hopefully it felt really good, coming towards the final end of it. Key run number 2, our threshold workout. This is our introduction to threshold in this challenge. And so we're going to certainly go upward from here, working that threshold energy zone, really applicable to our endurance racing. And then our key run number 3 is always our long run of the week, our endurance run. Hopefully it's just an easy peasy pleasure cruise. All smiles on this one, hopefully. As always, there's my friendly reminders. We're coming to the end of the week to get in and check off those boxes saying I did the workouts. As always, but in this challenge in particular, we want to be chasing that 100% completion percentage to get in there, check off those boxes. Just a little heads up in advance. Obviously, we're finishing up 2023 strong here, pushing straight through to New Year's, but we just wanted to let everyone know coming into 2024, we're going to kickstart immediately, I believe on the 7th or so, with not only our 8-week, so a little bit longer, back to the 8-week general fitness challenge, which will be winter run challenge. We'll also be re-kickstarting again this year, that 10-week half marathon challenge that we did last year with the 5-week add-on. We'll target races towards the middle of March and in the end of April, where I know a lot of our Team Wilpers athletes will be down for that rock and roll Nashville, both half marathon and full marathon weekend. Certainly plan on making it down there myself as well. So all of that kickstarting here at the top of the year. Signups will open within the next week or so. Let's jump straight in here to our week 2 workouts. Run number 1, VO2 max interval workout. Main structure, pretty simple. 1 minute on, 1 minute off. So that's a work to recovery ratio of 1-to-1. We're getting even work to recovery. No need to be intimidated by this workout. So while we're targeting a little bit of a faster pace, this is a relatively short interval with a pretty generous recovery time here. So we're using this faster paces to try to find some efficiency in the stride. When we get up, a lot of kind of wiggle can come into the stride at easy pace, but the faster you get, you actually start to really find efficiency. So while this is a VO2 max pace that we're going for, it's not really a full out VO2 max workout per se. As I mentioned, what we're really trying to do is find efficiency in the stride by having those shorter, faster intervals. So hopefully you actually really enjoy this one. So for our long distance runners, so many people have been coming through their key endurance season training this summer for 10Ks, half marathons, etc. This might be a pace you haven't revisited in a long time, maybe at all. So be gentle, be generous with yourself. It's going to take some figuring. It's going to take a little finesse to find the pace. Just remember, this is a fast run is very far from a sprint. So it's something that should be pretty manageable here. So I think, especially for the distance runners after a long endurance training season, some of these paces are actually really fun. Hopefully you kind of rediscover some of that kind of excitement in a short, fast interval. You'll notice that we included striders a lot, but this is a great example of how to use the strider to get ready for the main workout. So we've talked in the past sometimes about the appropriate pacing of striders, and usually I leave it pretty nebulous in terms of I just want it to move towards a hard pace. But when you're coming into a workout like this, where you have a very specific pace you're going to be targeting in the workout, it's not a bad idea to move that strider towards finishing near that pace at least. So still starting easy and accelerating up. So just for the final couple seconds, maybe you're touching on that pace just for a second or two before you come back down into your easy running. So something to try out. Key run number 2. Back to threshold. That's a bread and butter workout of this challenge for sure. Our threshold runs. So we're going a little bit more time at zone. The base version of this workout is 3 by 5 minutes, 2-minute recoveries, and then a 4-minute chunk. So it's a step up from week 1 for sure in terms of the time at zone. Because we're stepping up this week, we're going to allow a little bit longer break in between those interval segments. So this is something that's not necessarily typical on a threshold workout. In the weeks to follow, we'll be adding a little bit more time, obviously, but also pulling that recovery time back down, keeping it a little bit tighter, more so around a minute. But this week, those 2-minute recoveries are there to help you really kind of get into the pace, start to feel it, feel what hanging on is like, but also provide a little extra buffer for recovery so you can kind of stick with and go after the workouts. So to keep in mind with these threshold workouts in particular, threshold pace is kind of defined by the pace in which you could run for 1 hour maximum. So you do have to be awfully fit. You have to be awfully trained to do that. So don't think that the threshold pace, you just walk out the door and you just run it for an hour. It means that you're very, very well trained to hold that pace for that duration. That being said, it should, no matter what, still be an endurance race pace that you could maintain for a significant amount of time. So we're breaking this down in little 5-minute chunks, which doesn't necessarily make it easy, but it should be very, very achievable. If you're feeling completely maxed out by these, if it's feeling incredibly difficult, it would actually probably behoove you to drop off the pace a little bit to something that feels more comfortable, like an endurance race pace, like something that you could hold for 45 to 60 minutes at maximum ability. So just know that that's okay. As a matter of fact, half marathon pace would be another great pace to run this workout. It's a very high percentage of threshold pace. So keep in mind, just make that effort match something that you could hold for a longer period of time. This doesn't want to creep up and become 5K style VO2 max workouts. Final run of the week, our endurance run. As always, this is just a nice, easy pace run to finish out the week. For more experienced runners, this is our weekly long run, so certainly feel free to add time, distance, etc. onto this workout. Count that as your long run for the week. A couple questions that came up from the group this week. So first question was, I'm running a half marathon on Sunday, then going to join the holiday challenge. Should I retest or just test at the end? Not tested since end of summer, and that was outside. The challenge will be more on the tread, so not sure I can hit the same speeds as my last test on the tread. So a couple things here that I think are worth talking about. One is, do you test right after your race? And the other is transitioning inside to outside and using those paces to go back and forth, which I think is gonna hit a lot of people here sooner rather than later, if not already. So the first thing is I really wouldn't recommend going to try to test coming right off a race. I don't think you're probably gonna get the results that you're hoping for trying to carry that fatigue through. So using those old paces is probably how I would start it. That being said, I am 100% slower running inside on a tread than I am running outside. I'm not gonna get the same results running on a treadmill as running on the road. So you are gonna have to kind of work to get yourself some new targets for inside. And so what I would kind of urge you to do is try to match the effort level as best as possible. So you've been obviously training. If you're going out to run a half marathon, you hopefully know what some of these paces feel like. Try once again to match it as close as possible effort-wise on the tread, and go ahead and assign yourself some new pace targets to do the workouts. Then if you are planning on really staying indoors throughout the winter months, you're gonna be doing most of your workouts on the tread. Probably makes sense coming to the end of this challenge to do a 20-minute test on the treadmill so that you're going into the our winter months with fresh new pace targets that you can continue using indoors. The next question here was, said, sorry coach, not usually a quitter, but had to quit the holiday run challenge, doctor's orders to stop running, but I do want to maintain running fitness. Do you know what it is to do the equivalent cycle time or distance per week so I don't lose everything I've trained to maintain the same as running fitness? So while I don't know an exact comparison in terms of time on a percentage base going from running to cycling, there are certainly other ways to kind of evaluate that. And one that I might consider looking into is changing the metric that you're kind of using to evaluate your workouts. One that might be pretty applicable would be training stress scores. So this is one, or just training stress in general. Different platforms have different ways of coming up with this. I believe Garmin has body battery, and Strava has a fitness score. Training Peaks has TSS, which is training stress score. So that is a great way to kind of look at 2 workouts of different modalities and see what the intensity was. And Training Peaks is going to be my favorite of those options there. So training stress score of 100 means you are at threshold for 1 hour exactly. That is the threshold, a TSS of 100. So there are all sorts of variations in there. But so if you're moving from the run onto the bike, I would try to match that training stress score maybe as close as possible. Or if you're planning out your week, is trying to figure out what you need to do on the bike to hit the same accumulated training stress score on the bike. And so it's certainly going to be more time. It's probably going to be, as I said, don't have it exact, but probably in the ballpark of 30 to 40% extra time on the bike than the run. You know, that's kind of, I ran a couple of quick figures and that was about how it was coming out. So maybe an opportunity for a little more intensity on some of those bike workouts, push the training stress score a little bit higher so it's not quite such a long time. The other thing I would consider is some other modalities such as elliptical, aqua running, things that are a little bit more mimicking the motion of running in general. So I know you mentioned there was some kind of residual stress issues that went along with it, but some of those other things might make it a little bit more interesting than just adding more and more time on the bike, and be slightly more applicable in terms of the crossover effect of cross-training modalities. And our final question here is just something, I saw this at the last minute, so I'm not fully prepared for it, but Christy brought up, has been some questions about easy pace, about it not being appropriate, being too slow based on the test, etc. So I thought I would take at least a moment and kind of mention some of the ways that it can be problematic coming off the test. And so while we could use, hopefully we can talk about this a little bit more and have a touch more context. If you're having problem with your paces in general based on your test, we certainly have to look at the test itself. So we talked in week 1 how the performance on that test really dictates what the pace is like for the rest of your challenge. So if you don't test well in that one scenario, your paces are going to be off. That being said, the test isn't amazing for all athletes. And especially if a 20-minute effort period, or a 20-minute run period, is challenging, then it's very, very hard to run hard for 20 minutes. If you're not an experienced kind of racer or test taker on the run, it also is a little bit challenging. You don't exactly know how to pace it, what you need to be doing to kind of run a max effort for 20 minutes. But when the test doesn't go well, the paces that correspond from the test result aren't going to be as accurate. So couple things to think about. It's one, was it a really hard, honest effort? Certainly we've seen some people kind of fessed up in the past. They're like, yeah, the paces weren't great, but I also really didn't try, give it a full effort. So if that's the case, you have to look and say, like, is it worth testing again to try to get a real honest assessment of fitness? Or do I just do a kind of call it sometimes an artificial pace adjustment of just assigning yourself a pace that's a little bit faster, that feels a bit more comfortable, using the corresponding paces that go with that to try to kind of match that effort that you feel is more appropriate. And both options are good. I always like to get as often as possible those real test results where I know, that these paces are based on the fitness. That's going to be your most accurate. But once again, plenty of people that don't have an amazing test. Doesn't mean you should be training with the wrong training paces just because you didn't test well. It would be worth making that artificial adjustment, getting yourself a little bit closer, and just step it up a little bit at a time. That being said, the easy pace in particular, across the scope of every athlete I've ever coached, almost always the athletes tell me they think their easy pace is too easy. I think a lot of that comes from, we kind of call it this gray zone training that you get on long runs. Is super prevalent in adult athletes, endurance athletes, etc. People are running their easy run workouts a little bit too hard, but not hard enough to be really tempo or threshold. So There's kind of this like gray zone stigma, which is not, means it's like not a productive workout, which is not really true either. You're still in a zone, you're still getting the benefit, but you'd be more productive to either be a little bit slower or a little bit faster. So in terms of a feel across the scope of a workout, I think a lot of people are used to their easy runs feeling a little bit harder than they probably should be. So it's not bad necessarily to be scaled back down and to actually be at a slightly easier pace, even if it's pushing you into a kind of high zone 1, low zone 2. It's not a bad spot to be for your long workouts. So a couple things to consider is first, give it a little bit of a time, see how it feels to run at that easier pace. If you get used to it a little bit, a great scenario from those workouts is finishing and not being exhausted. That is not the goal of an easy pace workout. You want to walk away knowing you could do more. If you wanted to, you can do more tomorrow. You're not feeling fatigued afterwards. The second thing is, if that pace genuinely isn't working out for you, should you retest? And then finally, if retesting is not a great option, should you make a pace adjustment on your own to make it feel a little bit more comfortable? These are your workouts at the end, so there are no rules, just right, if you will. So make it work for you for sure. But otherwise, I appreciate everybody being here again. Wish you an amazing finish to week 1, an incredible week 2. We'll see you back next week. Have a great one.